what we're going to do is just talk about some age reversal therapies that are very geroprotective. They seem to have really powerful benefits for all the organs in the body. And there's some really great things on these peptides that haven't yet been discovered. And so yeah, if you think about these peptides, these bioregulators, what they do is they regulate the gene expression. And so they have a wide variety of different genetic expressions. Some experts say that the bioregulators, they are short peptides, and some cut off short at 4, and some say 7 amino acids. And so I think for our purposes today, we'll probably go 2 to 7 peptide chain amino acid chains is what we're going to look at. And what we found with these peptides is they can penetrate into the nuclei and nucleus of the cell. And then what they also do is anytime you penetrate into the nucleus of the cell, it triggers the histone proteins, and then it triggers protein synthesis. So Dan, we've always learned that there's 2 ways you can trigger protein synthesis. Number 1 is you can lift weights, and then your body naturally wants to build muscle in response to that, wants to adapt to it. Or the second way we can do it is we can eat protein. And now there's a third way, which is using these bioregulators, because they seem to trigger the protein synthesis. And so what happens in an organ if you trigger protein synthesis? What would you imagine would be kind of the benefit of that?
Well, that's going to be, tissue, making new cells. That's also, your neurotransmitters and hormones are all proteins. So you're making stuff that are necessary for life.
Yeah, really important. And so every organ system, it's the protein synthesis. One of the hallmarks of aging is when you have a loss of protein synthesis, when you can't fold the proteins in a way. Because if you think of that about these peptides, it's almost like building blocks. And the way that we structure them together and the shape of the peptide is what leads to the response in the body. So if you're turning on particular DNA pathways, well, it's that shape that locks the peptide in. And then if you have a short amino acid chain, what will happen is you'll get bonds with larger chains of amino acids. And so then you create this cascade of events, which is known as pleiotropy. And so, we've talked about the pleiotropic nature of peptides. And one of the benefits of these bioregulators is they seem to be very pleiotropic by nature. And if you look at some of the work of Dr. Kavasan, he's used these peptides, and he's seen the way that these short peptides, they interact with the genome, and then the genome can either trigger apoptosis. So apoptosis is this loss of cells that we no longer need.
Then when we're looking at, why would we need those things, and what are the things that are occurring like these? We had a discussion, it might have been on the first session 1 on our peptide masterclass, but we were talking about the misfolded proteins and even these senescent cells. When I think of those, I think about, think of it as a negative, like the dark side of a peptide, right? Like a misfolded protein. And that's one of the things I've started think about when it comes to the neurodegenerative or the aging process, is when you got these accumulating cells, or in the brain with the neurodegeneration, you got these misfolded proteins, and they're I feel like they're like a mob. And, if it's like you and I, we walk out and we're the start of the mob. We don't have a lot of sound. We're not really attracting a lot more people. And if we go out in the middle of the street, we might be able to block one lane. But the more people we get, the louder our sound, the more people we're affecting, and the more things we can block. And I think about these misfolded proteins and these senescent cells as being like the Darth Vader of peptides. They're creating a really negative signal, and they're stimulating the body to do these things. So, these bioregulators and peptides are beneficial for everybody, not just people who are suffering with issues. We've been biohacking the shit out of ourselves with these things. And I think one of the reasons it's so important is even if you just think about them being signaling molecules, and how
Mm,
many other signals is our body being, just bombarded with on a daily basis. So it's like cutting through the static. So these bioregulators are improving, even though we may have these compounds in our body, but using the peptides cuts through all the accumulated static that's just happening to us day to day. So it improves that function, like you were just saying. It improved the cell turnover, right? And
yeah.
it improved, it made these cells develop better. So I just think it's like cut through the static, right?
We're going to talk about 3 peptides, and Dr. Kavasan did a study that spanned over 2 decades, and it had about 120,000 participants in it. And they used these 3 peptides, the pineal peptide, the Ventorf, and the thymus peptide. And so he found that the people who use these 3 peptides, they had a remarkable recovery and a decrease in mortality by 33%. And he also found that these people, not only did they have, they live longer, but they had fewer diseases. They seemed to have better health expression late into their life. Most of these participants lived into their 80s, and doing very few additional things, but just by taking a bioregulator peptide. So, well, how do you think that would? I mean, what do you make of that study, Dan?
I mean, that's first of all, it's like that's my next. That goes on my next stack. First of all, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's massive. That's huge changes, but understanding, first the pineal gland is just regulating our circadian rhythm. You know, that's fascinating in of itself. I'm really interested to learn, what these others are doing. But, from what I understand, just from what you've talked about, regulating our, not just our circadian, but all these other rhythms, the infradian, supradian rhythms, and then adding in that healthy circulation and regulating the immune response. Like, man, that's orchestrating, so many different functions in the body. And these, it seems that these could really be like a base to just getting anybody started, not any of the programs. That's awesome.
Yeah, and the way you can think about it too is, it's like, okay, well, what season are the organs most taxed? And this is how I've structured it, and you may have a different way, but I want to make sure that my patients are on some kind of renal or kidney support in the winter when it's colder. I want to make sure that they've always got Ventorp, for the blood vessels in their body. And then as we get into the summer, I want to make sure they're working on the heart. In the spring, it's going to be liver, it's going to be gallbladder. In the fall, it's going to be heavy on the digestive system and the immune system. So, if you kind of structure it and you say, well, what systems get the most bombarded and go through the most trauma during the seasonal changes, and then you can just constantly be priming and moving the needle higher and higher. And that's what I'm doing for myself now. And so I've got a goal to get 8 years below my biological age. I want my biological age to be 8 years younger than my chronological age, based on true age testing and phenotype testing from the blood labs. And so, I've got some work to do. I think I'm like 2 years right now. And so I'll let everyone know how this experiment goes. But Dan, you may want to join me on this one.
Yeah, I'm totally in on this. I mean,
Are,
and
are
that's,
you using the True Age, the PACE testing with True Diagnostics?
I haven't used that yet. No.
Okay. Yeah, I just did a podcast with Ryan Smith, and yeah, their technology we were early users, but their technology is just 10 times better than it ever has been. So check it out. They're great.
Hey everybody, Regan Archibald here. I hope you enjoyed the Go Wellness show and maybe learned a couple things you could apply to your practice. If you're a healthcare entrepreneur who wants to work in an academic think tank with like-minded humans who are just like you, looking to provide better service, better quality of care for your patients, reach us at info@gowellness.com and we're happy to do a free practice analysis for you.